What is it about Detroit-style pizza that has so many internet foodies buzzing? Is it the unusual way it's assembled? Or maybe it's that caramelized cheesy crust Detroit pizza is so well known for? Whatever it is, that's what we're going to be making today, and you'll be happy to know that this is one of the easiest restaurant-style pizzas to replicate at home. You don't need a fancy pizza stone to make it, and the dough is relatively no fuss to make. The crust turns out soft and pillowy, a lot like a focaccia, and overall, I think Detroit-style pizza is worth trying on your next pizza night. We're going to begin by making our crust. So here I'm starting with 3 cups of all-purpose flour, and to this I'm going to add 2 1/4 teaspoons of instant yeast, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and 1 1/4 cups of water. That's about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm also going to add in 2 tablespoons of olive oil, which apparently I have no choice because that's about all I have left. So now we're going to mix this together, and of course you could do this in a stand mixer, but I like doing this by hand. And maybe you've noticed we haven't added any salt yet. I'll tell you why in a second. But bring this together into a very soft, shaggy dough that looks something like this. You don't have to knead it. We're just going to clean off our fingers and now cover this and let it auto-lease for 30 minutes. So in other words, we're going to let it rest to allow the flour to absorb a lot of the moisture in the dough. If we had added the salt in, it would have interfered with that. Auto-leasing your dough is good when you make any type of bread because it helps develop the gluten faster and it cuts down on your kneading time. Now I've added 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt along with a little bit of water to help dissolve it. And now we're going to do what bakers call stretch and fold. Grab some of that dough from the side, lift it up, and fold it into itself, and do that all the way around the dough. And after about 1 turn, you're going to notice that your dough will tighten up and it'll be easier to knead. You have to knead it for 5 to 7 minutes to really develop the gluten, and because this is more like a focaccia dough, you can expect it to be a little on the sticky side. This, however, I found was a little too sticky, so I decided to sprinkle in about another tablespoon of flour. And while I was at it, I used that flour to kind of clean off my fingers. That's a really good trick to do when you're making bread. And I found that 1 tablespoon of flour made a huge difference. It was way easier to knead, so don't go overboard when you're adding more flour. A little goes a long way. So after 7 minutes of kneading, this is what my dough looks like. It's nice and smooth, but at the same time you can see it's super soft. So now we're going to set that aside and let's talk about our pan now. There are special pans you can get for making authentic Detroit-style pizza, and if you're interested in those, I've linked it in the description. But this here is the pan I typically use for making pizza. It happens to be very similar to one of those pans, and it measures 10 by 15 inches. So if you do your pizza in a 9 by 13 inch, yours is going to be a little thicker, so it's up to you. I'm going to drizzle some olive oil all over, and now we're going to let our dough proof directly on this pan. And while I'm at it, I may as well stretch it out a bit to give it a head start. Now I'm going to cover it and let it proof for 45 minutes to an hour or until it's doubled in size. While that's happening, I'm going to make the sauce. So into a pot, I'm going to add 2 cups of crushed tomatoes, along with 2 tablespoons of tomato paste and half a cup of water. Now I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of dried oregano, half a teaspoon of dried basil, 1 1/2 teaspoons of garlic powder, and you want to also add 2 teaspoons of sugar, but I forgot to show that, and 1 teaspoon of salt, and finally 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of cracked black pepper. Turn on your heat, and now we're going to let this come to a boil and then lower it to a simmer and let it cook for 45 minutes to 1 hour. The longer you cook the sauce, the more flavorful it'll be. For a thinner sauce, you can leave the lid on, but if you want it more chunky and thick, then take the lid off. That'll give it a chance to reduce and thicken as it cooks. So after about an hour of proofing, this is what the dough is going to look like. It's clearly doubled in size, and it's going to be way easier to stretch to the edges of the pan. So go ahead and do that. But while you're at it, you want to be gentle with it at the same time because you don't want to destroy all the little air bubbles. Those pockets of air are really important if we want to get the texture of this crust right. So as soon as you have the dough stretched out, you want to cover it and let it proof for another 30 to 45 minutes or so. You could even take it up to another hour if your place isn't very warm, but it won't be quite doubled in size, but it will be noticeably lighter and fluffier. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now for toppings, traditionally brick cheese is used on Detroit-style pizza, but I couldn't find any. So here I have 2/3 Monterey Jack and 1/3 mozzarella, 2 cups of cheese in total. And here I have about 125 grams of pepperoni that I've sliced by hand. And the really unusual thing about Detroit-style pizza, the toppings go on before the cheese and the sauce. So put down your pepperoni first, and now we're going to take our cheese and sprinkle it all over. And you want to purposely make sure you hit the edges of the pan with some of that cheese. You want it to melt between the crust and the pan, so that way it'll create that beautiful caramelized cheesy crust. And you're probably wondering, why did I cube the cheese and not grate it? This is going to cook in a very hot oven, and by cubing it, it'll be less likely to burn. So now you want to take your sauce and create 3 stripes just like you see here. I ended up using the entire amount, but in my opinion that was a bit too much. So the next time I do this, I'm only going to use about 2/3 of the amount of sauce. So now my pizza is ready to go into the preheated 500-degree Fahrenheit oven for 15 minutes. And this is what it's going to look like when it's ready. The cheese should be a beautiful golden brown, and even though it's going to be tempting to dig into it right away, like all pizzas, you should let this rest for about 5 to 7 minutes before cutting into it. And don't worry if the edges of your crust look kind of caramelized and even burnt. That's what it's supposed to look like, so don't sweat it if you think you just burned your pizza. So after a short rest, we're going to take it out of the pan, and you'll be able to see very quickly a better view of that gorgeous caramelized crust. It makes a huge difference to slice into this after a little rest. Slicing into piping hot pizza is never a good thing. But let's get a better view of the bottom of that crust. That's exactly how it should look, a deep golden brown, and it's really crispy, yet the middle is soft and pillowy. And you get a surprise with every bite of this pizza. Sometimes you'll get a lot of cheese and pepperoni, and other bites you'll get a good dose of sauce. So the next time you have pizza night, give Detroit-style pizza a shot. And don't forget to let me know in the comments down below how it worked out for you, whether you liked it or whether you hated it. Whatever the outcome, at least now you know yet another way to eat pizza.